So we finally entered a Junker Queen meta, and you want to learn how to hard carry on this brawling menace that is terrorizing ranked. We'll look no further because this is the only Junker Queen guide you'll ever need, breaking down all of her abilities, tips and tricks on each one, big mistakes, matchup synergies, counters, and more. But special thanks to the sponsor of this video, Sneak Energy. Now, between grinding ranked, making daily YouTube videos, private coaching, and streaming, I do a lot in a day and my energy falls flat. But Sneak is there to pick me right back up. Now with their new 150-gram tub, these are the perfect size for new customers, and in all the top flavors, including Stealth, which I absolutely love. This is one of the best ways to get started on Sneak. Now, I've tried nearly every low sugar energy drink product on the market, and Sneak by far blows them out of the water with flavor profile and long-lasting energy. So what are you waiting for? Shop Sneak right now in the links down below. Now, Queen has recently received some absolutely insane buffs, making her one of the best, if not the best character in the entire game right now. But people are messing up fundamental things on Queen, starting off with her abilities. Let's talk about the Adrenaline passive, which is confusing but important to understand. You're going to get 200% heal on any wound damage you do. Melees or indirect knife pulls, where you throw your jagged blade and you pull it back, but it hits people on the way back, is going to heal you about 30 over 3 seconds. So it's like a tiny health pack. Direct knives are going to heal you 60 over 3 seconds. Carnage, the largest one, is going to heal you 80 over 3 seconds. And then Rampage or Ultimate is going to heal you for 120 over 4.5 seconds per person hit. Now, in addition to that, you're going to instantly heal for the remaining wound damage for any person that dies with wounds on them. So if you melee someone and then someone else kills them, even if 1 second passed, you're still going to get the extra 2 seconds of heal, which will be 20 healing instantaneously, which further adds to Junker Queen's overall sustain, which means that she's just going to have a lot of healing in the fight as she's fighting, and the more damage you do with wound and the more people that die as a product of you and your team going in, the more health Junker Queen is going to get and the faster she's going to get it. Now, we'll reference back to why Adrenaline passive is so important later, but just keep it in mind for now. Next off is Scattergun. 8 ammo at 80 damage per shot, but you can headshot with this gun, so you're going to want to aim either at the upper belly or towards the neck area, so some amount of your pellets are going to be hitting the head, and then the rest of them are still going to be making contact. We did reference Jagged Blade, which if you hit someone, it's going to do 50 damage just with the impact of the throw, and it's going to do 60 damage wound over 3 seconds if it hits, 30 damage over 3 seconds if it's pulled through, or if you just hit them with a melee. Now, the most important thing about Jagged Blade is the ability to pull people out of position. Oftentimes on Queen, you are fishing for a kill or fishing to hit a Jagged Blade. Someone's on the high ground above you and you hit them with the blade, pull them down into a Carnage, and you got a kill out of nowhere. While you don't have to hit every single thrown Jagged Blade, the more that you actually connect with, the more opportunities you're going to get to have a meaningful pick. So a higher Jagged Blade connection percentage means more potential picks and more games that you could hard carry. Next up is Commanding Shout. 200 self overheal, 50 team overheal, and 30% movement speed. This is a very important ability on Junker Queen, but making sure that you're getting value out of it is a hard thing. Many players put themselves in poor positions to where they have to use Commanding Shout defensively, and this is why positioning is so important on this character, still maintaining natural cover and areas that you can deny line of sight of the enemy team, so that when you're ready to engage and you're fully outside of cover, you're going for a play with purpose and with Commanding Shout. You're not playing in the open, being forced to use Commanding Shout defensively, and then there's someone at a position where you hit a Jagged Blade and you don't have Commanding Shout to follow up with it. Very important that you keep this in mind. Next up, we do got to talk about Carnage. 90 damage impact, 40 wound damage over 3 seconds, and of course the healing that comes with it. Now, 8-second cooldown, but for every single person you hit, it's going to get -2, which means if you hit 3+ people, 2-second cooldown means this is nearly free. You're going to get it over and over and over again, getting all the heal, all the damage, and being able to charge your ult incredibly fast. Now, the two most reliable ways to hit a Carnage is to either turn it around a corner or a piece of natural cover where enemies are behind it, so you're starting the animation pre-cover and you're extending out of the cover as the animation is going through, so you're not really exposing yourself with the long cooldown. Or you're combining it with Jagged Blade or Commanding Shout so that you can get someone out of position, put yourself into position, and then hit them with the Carnage. Keep in mind that if you connect with a Jagged Blade, that's already 50 damage impact plus 60 damage wound over 3 seconds, and if you combine that with the Carnage impact of 90 damage plus 40 damage over 3 seconds, you're killing squishies incredibly quickly with this combo. So you could be playing somewhere on the front line or playing around a piece of cover, hit a Jagged Blade, and pivot very quickly off of the pull from Blade, Commanding Shout, and Carnage and kill someone out of nowhere that was just minding their own business, peeking for a second, get hit with the blade, and actually executed. Now last up is Rampage, which is going to do 40 damage impact, and it's going to do 60 damage over time over 4.5 seconds, and it also antis. You are going to get healing from this as well, and of course, because you can combine this with your other abilities, and anyone that dies will give you that extra wound damage instantly as heal, it's important to understand that this can snowball very easily, but you got to make sure that you play around things like Suzu or other stuns that can cancel you out of Rampage. It does have a rather lengthy animation at the start of it, so you can get punched out by Doomfist, slept, canceled in some other way, so just keep these things in mind. Now let's move on to the role, mistakes, matchups, and more on Junker Queen so that you can master this character as quickly as possible. She can play in 2 distinct compositions, both Brawl and Dive. Traditionally, a Brawl composition is where she resides in, a comp that wants to get in, utilize her shout and her close range damage to fight an enemy up close and personal, and either put the enemy main tank in an uncomfortable position because they don't play in the same effective range, or look for opportunities of players that are in the back line that you can push and press with your shout and the rest of your abilities. Now, typical Brawl characters would be characters like Mei, Reaper, Cassidy, Lucio, Kiriko, all characters that could enable you to get in or want to go with you, or they just want to fight generally around you. This is what makes up a Brawl. Now, next up is Dive composition, where Junker Queen actually plays into Dive fairly well, primarily due to the fact that her shout can enable and engage by your Dive characters. Her herself can pivot pretty quickly, where you don't necessarily have to fight everything on the front line. You can play around the corners and the edges, looking for an opportunity to speed past the enemy front line and engage on a squishy or even a support. And this has typically been played with characters like Tracer, Sombra, Moira, and of course still Lucio, which is kind of like Queen's bread and butter. Now, the number one mistake that Junker Queen players make is that they're not flexible enough and they commonly want to just push W. You got to realize that just because you're a Brawl tank doesn't mean that you can face everything head on. In fact, most of the time, this is actually incorrect. There are other Brawlers like Zarya and Rein that you don't really want to face up in a straight battle. While there'll be times where you could engage on these characters based on their cooldowns or their poor positioning, you don't want to just force a direct engagement, because after you utilize all your cooldowns, now you're a sitting duck up against a fully charged Zarya or a Rein that's beating on you. You're just gonna die. Unlike these characters though, Junker Queen can pivot on a dime, and this is where her power truly comes from. The idea is that you can establish early presence and pressure up against the enemy tanks, but look for opportunities to completely ignore them, bypassing a Zarya or a Rein just to kill an out-of-position DPS or maybe even one of their supports. After the enemy tanks don't have the resources that you do, then you can play for your cooldowns and beat them in the Brawl head-to-head, but you don't want to take the fight on their terms. Junker Queen gets to pick and choose, and it's all about trying to put your opponents in an uncomfortable situation. Don't allow them to play to their strengths. Junker Queen gets to set the pace in a lot of these matchups. Both the fact that she has a speed boost in her Commanding Shout so she can rush something if she needs to, but also the longer a fight goes on, the more likely you are to hit someone with your Jagged Blade, pull them out of position, and set up a play based on that. So it's only a matter of time, and that's why we call it fishing. Now, you do got to be very careful about making sure that you connect on your cooldowns. There's a lot of characters in the game that are going to shut down your cooldowns or deny you, especially wasting a shout, or even if you combine it with a Carnage, using both these cooldowns just to get booped away, flailed away, it's Suzu'd. These cooldowns are very scary for a Junker Queen, because a lot of the time, you're going in and pivoting on a specific play you see that if you don't get that connection, you don't get those kills, or more importantly, you don't get that heal, you could find yourself out of position and basically very low health and killed out of nowhere. Now let's talk about some matchups. One of the things that you should be trying to do is you're trying to make sure that you don't waste those cooldowns pre-engage. We talked about that with specifically your shouts, putting yourself in a good position to where you're backed by cover, allowing yourself to decide when and where you want to use your cooldowns and not being forced to use them. Another thing is you need to make sure that you're fighting in your effective range to the best of your ability. This means that if you're Queen and you're up against like a poke composition with Sigma, you're looking for an opportunity to find a way to get into your range because he doesn't want to fight up close. This means that you're routing around the map, using cover and denying line of sight to look for an opportunity to force an engagement on your terms in your effective range. Now, you also have to make sure that you're operating on Junker Queen cyclically. You got to be engaging off your cooldowns, and one of the things that you need to understand is just because you got a kill, investing all your cooldowns, your blade, your carnage, your shouts, doesn't mean you should necessarily keep going for more. I do understand that Junker Queen's a momentum-heavy character, but it's also important to understand that without your cooldowns, you are much weaker than just about every single tank, so it's important for you to understand that there is value in just chilling after you got a certain amount of value, taking your time, getting your cooldowns back, and then going off another engage with your new cooldowns and snowball the rest of the kills out. Now let's talk about some counters that you could have some trouble with. First off is snipers. Snipers are very annoying for Junker Queen because you just can't really do much to these snipers. You don't really play well with snipers yourself, so it's not really that much of an option for your team to just play the sniper v sniper if you're Queen and they're a tank that enables snipers like Sigma. Now, this doesn't mean that you're just stone cold dead to snipers. You could definitely route around the map, look for engagements that use cover until the point of you bursting out and chasing down these snipers. But this is going to be rather hard to do on some of the sniper maps like Junkertown, Havana, and Circuit Royale, so keep that in mind. Those are probably Junker Queen's worst maps. Now, in addition to that, flyers can be problematic for your character. Any Echo Mercy, Pharah Mercy shenanigans are just characters that you just can't really deal with. Most of the tanking cast can't, but you can definitely help out a character like Cassidy get in position and protect him from enemies trying to push him, so that is one way that you can help in the matchup, but not directly. Now, we do got to talk about the God of Brawl, Zarya, and the God of Poke, Sigma. So, Zarya is kind of a direct counter to Junker Queen in a sense, but there's still ways to beat her. If you're just trying to fight her straight up in a 1v1, you're going to lose every single time. But just like I said with the pivoting, you got to understand that Zarya has a problem catching players that are going on her backline, especially if she is baited into using the bubbles for herself. It's not like she has any form of CC or anything that can shut you down if you go very proactively into her backline, and most of the time, Zarya is a character that you want to play a little bit of keep away with. Never fighting her directly when she has all of her cooldowns, and making sure that you look for key opportunities where she's too far away from her team or without too many bubbles where you can burst past her, kill her main source of sustain, maybe an Ana or some other support, and then fragging the rest of the team out from there. Never engaging her where she wants you to, playing in front of her always and constantly fighting her. That's exactly what she wants you to do, and you're going to lose that matchup. Next up, we do got to talk about Sigma. Just like I said, you do got to make sure that you're never allowing the Sigma to maintain his space against you. It's very similar to playing Ryan against Sigma or Zarya against Sigma. You need to find a very specific point where the time when you peek a Sigma to the time that you're on top of a Sigma is as small of a time frame as possible, because the longer you're staying in open space, the longer you're peeking the Sigma away from your effective range, the worse and worse the matchup becomes for you. Now, last but certainly not least, we do got to talk about the mirror. This is one of the most important things in this meta in particular. How do you beat Junker Queens in the mirror matchup? Now, of course, you got to make sure that you are not using your shout and trying to cleave a Junker Queen that still has their shout to use defensively against you. It is very frustrating to shout, try to cleave a Junker Queen, only for them to shout, back up, and then push forward and cleave you. If you miss your carnage, but they hit theirs, it's GG. Now, the most important thing is making sure that you're not investing all your cooldowns for value that isn't sustainable. Like, if you go into their team really hard, you invest shout, you invest carnage, you invest knife, everything, and you don't actually get any guaranteed kills, you're going to get hit by a knife, pull back into their team, all their cooldowns are going to be invested on you, and you have no means to actually get that healing back. I would say, if anything, this matchup is a lot about patience, still fishing and looking for an opportunity to pivot, but making sure that you're disciplined when you go for a certain engagement engagement, and be extra careful when you commit into the enemy backline or commit to the enemy's controlled space without your cooldowns, because if you don't get anything definitive in that engagement, you could get traded out or you'll have nothing in the tank to stop the enemy Junker Queen from killing your team. Now, if you have any major questions on how to master Junker Queen, definitely let me know in the comments down below. But if you enjoyed the video, smash that like, subscribe, and make sure you check out Sneak for extra energy and easy wins in the description right now down below.